I don't know about anyone else, but there was a time before 2 films had been released that the task of reading Harry Potter was quite intimidating. I remember first beholding Goblet of Fire when I was 5 or 6, thinking that could kill someone if it was dropped from large enough height, or if someone tripped over it, or attempted to read it. But there was a series tucked amongst the bookshelves that didn't have that touch of Hollywood, nor that light-heartedness as I perceived it at the time. Something darker, something with horror, something about life-changing circumstances in a fantastical world of consequence and danger. Darren Shan, The Vampire Saga, by Darren O'Shaughnessy! Yeah, before vampires were inspiring mass-selling BDSM erotica, they were the subject of an enticing series for children and young teens. That's not a good sentence. These were different. They were a race with a code of ethics, mainly concerned with blood consumption, tribalistic rituals, genealogy linked with that of wolves. Introduced to these beings by way of a travelling quote-unquote freak circus is our eponymous hero Darren Shan, a character who becomes one of those vampires due to a significant mistake he makes. As a consequence, he is tasked with being the assistant to one of the members of the Cirque du Freak, Larton Crepsley, who I'll have you know is the fucking man. The series follows their adventures together, which are guided by the grander narrative of a war between 2 factions of their race, or 2 races of their species really, which relies on the prophecy of princes and lords of immense power and relationships, blah 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 blah. 8 years old through to my teens, I loved this series with a passion I am so happy to have felt, and still feel in a similar way for different things today. I'm also lucky enough to be in contact with a bunch of friends who have very fond memories of the series and read it at the same time as I did.
It was definitely the first trilogy was my main, area of expertise. Those were the 3 books that I read more than once. My mum read Cirque du Freak before she gave it to my brother.
Yeah.
And really loved it. She got into it herself. She was like, this is a damn good book.
That's pretty sweet.
So yeah, she then gave it to my brother and said, I read it to make sure it shouldn't scare you too much. And then I'm not sure whether I read it also right away after my brother was done or a couple of years later, but that was my introduction to those books. I'm out of breath now, so now it just sounds like I'm very excited about Darren Shan.
I was in year 7, I was an awkward, prepubescent kid, and I would go to the library on my breaks because, like I say, awkward, and I saw this one poster behind the library desk, and it was advertising Cirque du Freak, I think with the silhouette of Madame Octa in the top corner. I think
I remember that promotional material.
I don't know why, it just really intrigued me, so I went up to the librarian and I was like, do you have that book? And she's like, yeah, it's over. So I rented the book out from the library and I was immediately hooked. And I say because the period of time of my life, Darren is the same age as I was then in the books when it starts. And the fact that he is symbolically, well not symbolically, he's physically going through these changes as a vampire is very mirroring
of puberty.
Yeah, and then he gets the purge later on in the later books when I've been reading through these books throughout my secondary school years, and it's just it matched sort of.
I'm pleasantly surprised by how much you remember. I'm pleasantly surprised by how much you remember. You're bringing up all these concepts and later scenes of the book.
Yeah, well, like I say, they were my favourite books growing up.
There was such an energetic and almost constant introduction and development of a variety of characters, and everyone had a different favourite.
The freaks themselves,
I love.
If it's all right to still call them that.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering how to refer to them in this script.
I'm going to call them the freaks because that's what they're called in the books for children.
Exactly, that's what I'm going to call them as well.
Pretty much everyone in the Freak Show is great, but especially I felt really in awe and impressed by Evrevon the Snake Boy.
Yes!
Because when I was 8 or 9, being a snake boy was probably the coolest thing. And I used to think, when they make a movie of this, as they definitely will, and it will be set in England and won't be Hollywoodized and ruined, I would like to play Evrevon. Despite at the time having no interest in acting whatsoever, and in fact actively avoiding drama at school.
There was Vancher, the mysterious vampire prince who lives experimentally and traditionally in the extreme. There was Debbie Hemlock, English teacher turned badass when the push of conflict comes to shove, or the push of a sword. Do you remember much about her when she comes back?
Yep, she has aged, obviously, whereas Darren hasn't, and he spots her as his school teacher, where he is
As his school teacher,
going as a cover, like, as a kid.
I always visualise Naomi Harris from 28 Days Later.
I do a little bit as well, actually.
that was grown-up Debbie. That was pinpoint grown-up Debbie. Especially when she becomes a bit of a badass towards the end of the saga. I think she's literally wielding swords.
I didn't realise it until now, but that is spot on. And Harkat.
Harkat mold. Harkat molds, a sewn-together Frankenstein monster-esque creature of 3 foot. I'm so glad you brought him up, because... Okay, tell me, why did you love Harkat mold so much?
I think just because... At first, the little people were just so intriguing, like, what the hell are they? I always imagined them in, like, these, like, dark blue robes, and sort of, like, there was this game I had called Heroes of Might and Magic 3, and there was these monsters in one of the in one of the dungeons called troglodytes, and I imagined them sort of like that, but with eyes, because troglodytes don't have eyes. And then, obviously, on the is it Lord of Shadows? No, River of whatever one of the book covers I've got, I think it's the last book actually, has got a little person on the cover, and it's pretty spot on to what I imagine.
That's Sons of Destiny, I'm pretty sure.
Sons of Destiny, yeah. I'm getting Lake of Souls mixed in because obviously that's a big reveal for Harkat.
Yes, and we are allowing spoilers. We're allowing spoilers on this video, so we may as well talk about the spoilers. It turns out that he is the reincarnation, if it's fair to say that a little person is a reincarnation, of the infamous vampire traitor
Kurda Schmalt.
Kurda Schmalt, destined to be a prince, but sold... I can't remember why he sold the vampires out. Do you remember, Tom?
He was trying to broker peace, I think.
That's right. That's why his death was... It had complicated feelings attached to his death.
Poorly judged decisions made on his part. But he was so, like, this is the way it has to be done. And it really wasn't.
It reminds me now of Dragon Ball, in that it provided a gigantic cast, some members coming and going throughout the plot, showcasing a variety of body types and fictional species. Moreover, the plot was organised through sagas, like Dragon Ball, each saga of 3 books united by different settings and character arcs, and even style to a point. Like Dragon Ball. In fact, now that I think about it, the series was very much like a comic that had been adapted into prose, especially as the series progressed. It features a significant degree of action, fighting, stunts, not to mention epic set pieces. Incidentally, there was a manga adaptation of this series. I mean, the material was just rife for it. Not the most sophisticated take, but I was a young boy who wanted that kind of thing from a reading experience more than anything else. I wanted... the supernatural, I wanted superpowers, I wanted conflict between good and evil, I wanted adventure, action, all that stuff. The series presented itself primarily as one of horror, and as far as the first half of the saga is concerned, and its intended audience is too, it certainly delivers on that front. Fears such as arachnophobia, claustrophobia, of limb loss, of brutality and gore are all explored with a pace and a keen eye for atmosphere, and runs home an uncomfortable truth that under terrible circumstances children can be privy to it all.
And there's also another human character, Sam, who loves pickled onions.
Sam Crest, or Crest, yes. His death is the scene that sticks out to me the most when I remember Darren Shan.
Yeah, there's some pretty horrible stuff in there.
When I came to a few seconds or minutes later, I don't even know how much time had passed, the railroad station was eerily quiet. I couldn't hear anybody running or screaming or fighting. All I could hear was a steady munching sound a little way ahead of me. I sat up slowly, ignoring the hammering pain in my head. It took my eyes a few seconds to readjust to the darkness. When I could see again, I realized I was gazing at the back of the Wolfman. He was crouched on all fours, head bent over something. He was the one making the munching sounds. the dizziness from the punch meant it took me a while to realise it wasn't a something he was eating, it was a someone. Yeah, I remember first reading that and thinking, this might actually be too intense.
Like, if Christian mothers knew about these books, they would have been burnt a long time ago.
But of course, I kept reading it, as material which so delights and teases those senses will have you do.
It was a school night for me, and I was staying up much later than I should have been reading it.
Yeah.
Because I had to keep going at that point. I couldn't stop. I had to
Yeah,
see where it was
absolutely.
going. Like, oh my god, I'm so, like, intensely, like, hooked.
These were not books you put down very often.
No.
I remember reading the whole thing, or at least quite a few chapters, not an insignificant amount of chapters, because it was just so gripping.
Yeah.
As a half vampire, he ages 1 year for every 5 that passes.
Oh.
And that was an interesting concept as a child, to have greater maturity in a younger body, as you can sometimes feel when a kid. I mean,
I think that probably did unsettle me a bit, because I, at that age, just couldn't wait to grow up. And it annoys me it annoys me no end that I was proved wrong.
Yeah, this is rubbish. I hate this.
Yeah, I wish I could go back. Just back when you felt wonder and awe every day, rather than just once a year when you take an especially smooth shit.
Or I'd go back and read some Darren Shan.
Yeah, because you could reread stuff then and it would still be as good as the first time you read it, which doesn't happen anymore.
I reread Darren Shan more than anything else.
That was probably the biggest threat to my literacy as a child, was the amount of rereading I did of stuff I already liked.
A lot of people would disagree with that assessment. Rereading is important.
Perhaps, yeah. It's just in a sheer numbers game, I'm lacking. But yeah, I'm sure that did. That was probably because I would get really like involved with specific writers rather than just the books themselves.
Yeah.
So that probably did influence me wanting to write. And I remember at that age I loved behind the scenes materials in books. So like I had a whole book of interviews with She Who Will Not Be Named. And
Who's that? Rowling?
J.K. Rowling.
Oh.
Yeah.
I used to wake up much earlier than my mums and sister, and many was the morning I'd reread or read a new installment of the saga with a love for the characters and world that felt personal in a way I haven't quite felt since. Bearded lady by the name of Truska,
Yes. Because
who
she's
speaks in a weird seal language.
Yeah,
Barked like
she's
a
so
seal.
mysterious. And then later on, she's like taking Darren aside after Larton's death, and he is like, "No,
Yeah, the
stop it!
grief!
I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it anymore." And she just like tidies him up, and that's when it hits him. That's when the death hits him, because she looks after him and just gives him
Yes!
that sort of downtime that he needs. And then he
That
sees
was
himself in
a-
the mirror, and that's when it hits him, and he says it out loud for the first time that Larton's died. And that was just like, oh.
My breath caught in my throat as I came face to face with my reflection. It may have been a trick of the dim light, but in the fresh clothes and hat, with my clean-shaven face, I looked very young. Like when Truska first kitted me out in this costume. "What do you think?" Truska asked. "I look like a child," I whispered. "That is partly the mirror," she chuckled. "It is made to take off a few years. Very kind to women." Removing the hat, I ruffled my hair and squinted at myself. I looked older when I squinted. Lines sprang up around my eyes, a reminder of the sleepless nights I'd endured since Mr. Crepsley's death. "Thanks," I said, turning away from the mirror. Truska put a firm hand on my head and swiveled me back towards my reflection. "You're not finished," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I've seen all there is to see." "No," she said. "You haven't." Leaning forward, she tapped the mirror. "Look at your eyes. Look deep in them, and don't turn away until you see." "See what?" I asked. But she didn't answer. Frowning, I gazed into my eyes reflected in the mirror, searching for anything strange. They looked the same as ever, a little sadder than usual, but... I stopped, realizing what Truska wanted me to see. My eyes didn't just look sad, they were completely empty of life and hope. Even Mr. Crepsley's eyes, as he died, hadn't looked that lost. I knew now what Truska meant when she said that the living could be dead too. "I do not want this," she murmured in my ear as I stared at the hollow eyes in the mirror. "You love life, he wants you to love it too. What would he say if he saw this alive but dead gaze get worse if you not stop? I gulped, deeply. "Empty is no good," Truska said. "You must feel eyes, if not with joy, then with sadness and pain. Even hate is better than empty." Mr. Crepsley told me I wasn't to waste my life on hate, I said promptly, and realised this was the first time I'd mentioned his name since arriving at the Cirque du Freak. It was Darren struggling to cope with grief.
Yeah.
And as you say, it was wonderful for Truska, of all the characters, to be...
No one understands her, but she clearly understands, like, what he's going through, to be the one that's misunderstood.
She puts him in the same pirate outfit that she made for him in the earlier books.
Yeah.
It's just that image of himself fueling the realization that, he's not going to see Crepsley again.
Yeah, and especially as like this is the first time I've said it out loud, and that's how like, vocalizing it has made it real, kind of thing. Just extremely rich moments in those books, and it was often situations between characters that were the richest, as they often are. Yeah.
When I was at peak consumption of this series, I wanted more. I filled reams of A4 with drawings of the characters and wrote speculative stories and general fanfiction set in that universe. That's when you know that a piece of fiction writing has you, that you have to interact with it beyond passive engagement with it. When it's almost too painful not to allow your mind more time in a world and reality that another mind constructed, because it's irresistible for the experience it gives you, whatever that experience may be for you, the reader.
And then you get a whole, like, it's probably no more than a page in the book, but it describes the sleepover they have before they sneak out to the circus.
That's right.
Yeah. And the fact that, like, Steve's dad is like, oh, you can watch a horror movie as long as it's only an old one and not a really scary one.
Yeah.
And then they sneak out at night and they're wandering the streets. And I'm not picturing anything more scary than the suburban village I lived in. Like, I'm just picturing residential streets that they're walking on.
So am I, fairly modern.
I guess I don't know where the circus is supposed to be. It's in like an abandoned building, isn't it?
It's an abandoned, decrepit building that could have been a cinema.
Yeah.
A while back, or at least a theatre.
That's very atmospheric.
Yeah, I loved that setting. It was very, very creepy because I just pictured just a very dark, black-looking, dusty place.
The idea of... We've barely even talked about the spider.
What's her name? Yeah, Madame Octa.
Yeah, Madame Octa, the trained tarantula, who can spin a web over your mouth that you then eat, and it's like a delicacy.
And
then they described how they had candy webs that you could buy at the circus.
Oh yeah, it was so detailed, so rich.
Yeah, and
so
it was like
bubblegum
flavor. It was candy floss, wasn't it?
That was the greatest thing about these books for me. The fucking atmosphere.
Yes, and the detail
still sticks in memory. Yeah, the candy shop. The extras that the little people would hand out on little trays. Do I still enjoy it now, as I enjoy other material from childhood or other material for children? I watched an episode of The Worst Witch the other day, and I thought that was wonderful. No, but it's the exact same way I don't enjoy Dragon Ball as I used to. It wasn't made for me now, it was made for me then. And it doesn't change the experience I had with it and the experience I still treasure. But regardless of that, there are definitely things that remain true about that series. Their strength for atmosphere creation, humour, and unrestrained creativity and originality. It was the first series of novels that I experienced serious fanaticism for, and the first time I felt passion for the quiet and cognitively valuable act of reading, and the first implication of how language can flirt and interact with the reality as I understand it. Blood will never not be hot, salty, and buttery to my mind. And as time forces me through the paces, it's never unlikely that I will not recommend this series to people of the appropriate age. This was world building, this was strange, this was mature, this was big, this was exciting, this was delightful. Hello, thanks for watching this. The beautiful people I talked to in the video can be reached via the links in the description. Tom there does the Twitch thing with a taste for classic PlayStation. We're hoping to talk about the novelizations of classic Resident Evil at some point. And Marlon produces a wonderful anthology audio series, Uneasy Dreams. If you enjoy Darren Shan's penchant for twisting the ordinary Western world in horrifying and humorous ways, Uneasy Dreams will be for you. I thank both of them for talking with me about a pleasant experience that we all happen to share. And my first end card, What Have I Become? I'm linking to a playlist of similar videos in length and style if you fancy that, and a subscription button. I don't know what that does.